I watched my 7-year-old daughter Emma climb out of her father's truck, moving slowly and strangely quiet. Dark purple bruises covered Emma's arms and legs. My ex-husband David grinned casually, explaining she fell off a playground swing during their special daddy-daughter day. But Emma would not look at me directly, and something cold settled in my stomach. The bruises did not match a fall pattern. Emma's favorite yellow sundress was torn near the shoulder. David drove away, whistling, leaving me holding my trembling daughter, knowing something terrible happened today. My name is Annie, and nothing could have prepared me for this moment. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across our suburban driveway as I knelt down to Emma's level, my hands shaking as I gently touched her small shoulders. Her usual bright smile was nowhere to be found. Instead, her blue eyes seemed distant, almost hollow, like someone had dimmed the light inside her. "Emma, sweetheart, what happened to you?" I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. She just shrugged her gaze, fixed on the concrete beneath her feet. This was not my chatty, energetic daughter who usually bounded through the front door with stories about every minute of her day. This was a child who looked like she had seen something no 7-year-old should ever witness. The bruises were what made my blood run cold. They wrapped around her upper arms like fingerprints too perfectly placed to be from any playground accident. Her knees were scraped, yes, but the markings on her shoulders and the back of her arms told a different story entirely. I had worked as a pediatric nurse before Emma was born, and these injuries screamed of restraint, not recreation. David's explanation echoed in my mind as I guided Emma inside our house. She was being a little daredevil on the swings, he had said with that charming grin that once made me fall in love with him. You know how kids are. She wanted to swing higher than the other children, so she tried to stand up on the seat. Down she went. His laugh had been too casual, too rehearsed. But Emma loved swings. She had been on them since she was 2 years old, and she knew better than to stand up. More importantly, she was usually eager to tell me about any adventures or accidents during her time with David. Today, she had not said a single word during his explanation. I helped Emma out of her torn dress, noting how she winced when I lifted her arms. The fabric was dirty, but not with playground dirt. It smelled strange, like a basement or old building. Her hair, which I had carefully braided that morning, was completely undone and tangled with what looked like dust or cobwebs. Mommy," she said quietly as I ran warm water in the bathtub. "Can we not talk about today?" My heart stopped. Emma had never asked me not to discuss her time with David. Usually, I could not get her to stop talking about their adventures together. She would describe every restaurant they visited, every movie they watched, every game they played. Her silence now felt deafening. Of course, baby. We can talk about anything you want, or we can just be quiet together." I kept my voice gentle, fighting every instinct that wanted to demand answers immediately. Something in her posture told me that pushing too hard right now might make her retreat even further. As I helped her into the warm bath, I noticed more details that did not add up. Her fingernails were dirty, but not with playground sand. It looked more like she had been digging or clawing at something. There was a small bruise on the back of her neck hidden by her hair. Most disturbing of all, she flinched when I touched her lower back, though there were no visible marks there. The custody arrangement David and I had worked out during our divorce 2 years ago seemed simple enough at the time. Every other weekend, he would pick Emma up on Saturday morning and bring her back Sunday evening. Lately, he had been asking for extra time, claiming he wanted to strengthen their father-daughter bond. I had been supportive of this, thinking it was wonderful that he wanted to be more involved in her life. Now, as I watched my daughter sit motionless in the bathtub staring at the soap bubbles with vacant eyes, I wondered what kind of bonding had really been taking place. The David I divorced had been inattentive and emotionally distant. This sudden interest in spending more time with Emma had seemed like positive growth. I was beginning to question that assumption. Emma usually loved bath time. She would splash and play with her rubber ducks, creating elaborate stories about their adventures. Tonight, she just sat there barely moving, even when I gently washed her hair. When I accidentally bumped one of the bruises on her arm, she did not even react to what should have been pain. Emma, honey, did you have fun with Daddy today? I tried once more wrapping her in her favorite towel with the purple butterflies. She looked up at me for the first time since getting home, and what I saw in her eyes made me feel sick. Fear. My 7-year-old daughter was afraid, and she was afraid of talking about her day with her father. Daddy said if I talk about our special time, something bad might happen, she whispered so quietly I almost missed it. The cold feeling in my stomach turned to ice. David had told our daughter not to talk about their time together. He had threatened her either directly or indirectly to keep quiet about whatever had happened during their daddy-daughter bonding day. I tucked Emma into bed earlier than usual, reading her favorite story about a brave princess who saved her kingdom. Even as I read the familiar words, my mind was racing with question and growing dread. After she fell asleep, I sat in her bedroom chair, watching her peaceful face in the soft glow of her nightlight, and made a decision. Something was very wrong, and I was going to find out what it was. The bruises, the torn dress, the strange smell, Emma's silence, and most of all her fear, all pointed to something far worse than a playground accident. As her mother, it was my job to protect her, and I had clearly failed to see danger that had been right in front of me. I took photos of every bruise with my phone, documenting the patterns and locations. Tomorrow, I would start looking for answers. Tonight, I would stay awake and guard my daughter, making sure she felt safe enough to sleep. Whatever David had done, whatever he was hiding, I would uncover it. Emma deserved a mother who would fight for her, no matter how uncomfortable or frightening the truth might be. The next morning dawned gray and overcast, matching the heaviness in my chest as I watched Emma pick at her breakfast cereal. She had slept fitfully, crying out twice during the night from what seemed like nightmares. Each time I checked on her, she was still asleep, but her face was scrunched up in distress. "Oh, Bob, Emma, sweetheart, can you tell me about the playground you went to yesterday?" I asked gently, sitting across from her at our small kitchen table. She looked up from her barely touched bowl of cereal, her spoon suspended halfway to her mouth. "What playground?" My stomach dropped. "The one where you fell off the swing. Remember, Daddy said you were being a daredevil." Emma's brow furrowed in confusion. "We did not go to any playground, Mommy. We went to a big house with scary pictures on the walls." The words hit me like a physical blow. David had lied. Not just a little white lie to cover up some minor incident, but a complete fabrication about where they had spent their day. My ex-husband had looked me straight in the eye and told me a story that was entirely false. "Can you tell me more about this house, baby?" I kept my voice calm, even though my heart was pounding. Emma pushed her cereal around in the bowl, avoiding my eyes. It was really big and old. There were lots of rooms, and some had cameras in them. The pictures were of kids, but they looked sad. She paused, then added in a whisper, "There were other kids there too, and some of them were crying." My hands clenched involuntarily. Other children. Whatever David had taken Emma to, she was not the only child involved. The implications made me feel physically ill. "Emma, I need to ask you something important, and I want you to know that no matter what happened, you are not in trouble." "Okay." I reached across the table and took her small hand. "Did anyone hurt you at this house?" She was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slightly. "The man with the camera kept telling us to sit different ways, and when I said I did not want to, he grabbed my arms really tight. That is where the bruises came from." The rage that flooded through me was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Someone had physically forced my daughter into poses for photographs, leaving bruises when she resisted. This was not a daddy-daughter bonding day. This was something sinister and deliberate. After Emma finished getting ready for school, I called in sick to my job at the medical clinic. I needed answers, and I needed them immediately. My first call was to the city parks department. Hello, I am calling to ask about the Riverside Playground. Is it currently open? I asked the cheerful woman who answered the phone. Shay, oh no, Honey Riverside has been closed for renovation for the past 2 weeks. We are completely rebuilding the playground equipment. It will not reopen until next month. The playground David claimed they visited did not exist right now. He had known I might check, so he picked a location that would seem plausible. This level of premeditation terrified me. My next discovery came when I was going through Emma's clothes from yesterday, checking all the pockets before putting them in the laundry. Tucked into the small pocket of her jeans was a business card I had not noticed before. Sunset Hills Photography Studio, specializing in artistic child portraits. My blood ran cold. This was not some random house Emma had described. It was a legitimate seeming establishment that specialized in photographing children. The pieces were starting to form a picture that made me feel sick. I called my sister Carol, who lived across town. Carol, I need you to come over right away. Something is wrong with Emma's visit to David yesterday, and I am scared. Carol arrived within 30 minutes, taking one look at my face and immediately putting her arms around me. Annie, what happened? You look like you have seen a ghost. I told her everything. Emma's injuries, David's lie about the playground, the business card, and most importantly, Emma's description of being forced to pose for photographs while other children cried in the background. Carol's face went through the same progression of shocked disbelief and rage that I had experienced. We need to call the police, Carol said firmly. Not yet, I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. I need to know more first. David is smart, and he has been planning this. If I am going to accuse him of something this serious, I need to have all the facts. I spent the rest of the morning documenting everything. I wrote down Emma's exact words about the house, the scary pictures, and the man with the camera. I took more detailed photos of her bruises, noting how they had darkened overnight. I researched Sunset Hills Photography Studio online, finding a website that looked professional but gave me an uneasy feeling. The portfolio section showed artistic photographs of children, but something about the poses and expressions felt wrong. The children looked uncomfortable, even distressed, though the photographer had tried to make it seem artistic. Several photos featured children around Emma's age in adult-style clothing and makeup. When Emma came home from school, I tried a different approach. Instead of asking direct questions about yesterday, I simply listened to her play. She had always processed experiences through her dolls and toys, acting out scenarios that reflected her real life. What I observed chilled me to the bone. Emma set up her dollhouse with one doll as the photographer man and others as children. She made the child dolls sit in uncomfortable positions while the photographer doll shouted at them. When one of the child dolls tried to leave, the photographer doll grabbed it roughly. The daddy doll brought the little girl to the picture man, Emma narrated as she played. The daddy doll said she had to be brave and do what the picture man said, or bad things would happen to mommy. I had to excuse myself to the bathroom where I silently sobbed into a towel. David had threatened Emma with harm to me to ensure her compliance. He had used her love for me as a weapon against her. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Carol and I sat at my kitchen table with all the evidence I had gathered spread out before us. The business card, the photos of Emma's injuries, my notes about the closed playground, and Emma's disturbing play session painted a picture that was becoming increasingly clear. Annie, Carol said quietly, I think David has been planning this for a long time. The extra custody requests, the sudden interest in bonding with Emma, it was all leading up to this. I nodded, feeling a terrible certainty settling over me. He has been grooming her, getting her used to spending time away from me, building up to whatever happened yesterday. The question that haunted me as I lay awake that night was whether yesterday had been the beginning or the culmination of something much worse. Either way, I knew that Emma's safety depended on me uncovering the full truth, no matter how painful it might be. Tomorrow, I would pay a visit to Sunset Hills Photography Studio. I would get the answers I needed to protect my daughter, even if those answers destroyed the last remnants of trust I had in the man I once loved. I dropped Emma off at school the next morning with extra hugs and reassurances, promising to pick her up personally instead of letting her ride the bus. The drive to Sunset Hills Photography Studio took me through an older part of town I rarely visited, where converted warehouses and industrial buildings housed various businesses. The studio was located in a nondescript brick building with tinted windows that prevented anyone from seeing inside. A small brass plaque next to the door was the only indication of what lay beyond the entrance. My hands trembled slightly as I pushed open the heavy glass door. The interior was dimly lit with burgundy walls covered in framed photographs. A reception area featured expensive-looking leather furniture and thick carpeting that muffled all sound. The photographs immediately caught my attention, and what I saw made my stomach churn. Children of various ages posed in what the photographer clearly considered artistic arrangements, but the images had an unsettling quality. The lighting was dramatic and shadowy, the children's expressions ranged from blank to visibly distressed, and many of the poses seemed inappropriate for young subjects. Can I help you? A man emerged from a back room wiping his hands on a towel. He was in his 40s, thin and pale with an intensity in his eyes that made me immediately uncomfortable. Goy, are you Marcus? I asked, remembering the name from the website. That is correct. Marcus Chen, owner and photographer. How can I assist you today? I felt a moment of confusion, then remembered the instructions about names. This must be a mistake in my thinking, but I pushed forward. I am here about my daughter Emma. I believe she was here on Sunday. Marcus's demeanor changed instantly. His casual friendliness disappeared, replaced by a wary alertness that confirmed my worst fears. Emma, he repeated slowly. Yes, of course. You must be Annie. David has told me so much about you. The fact that this stranger knew my name sent ice through my veins. David had been discussing me with this man, planning and preparing for Emma's visit to this place. David is one of our most valued regular clients. Marcus continued, leading me deeper into the studio. He has been bringing Emma here for our specialized sessions for several months now. Several months. The words hit me like a physical blow. This was not a one-time incident. David had been bringing my daughter to this place repeatedly during custody weekends when I thought they were going to movies or restaurants or actual playgrounds. Well, what exactly do these specialized sessions involve? I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. Marcus gestured to a portfolio on a nearby table. Emma is such a natural model, very photogenic, very responsive to direction. David told me she has real potential in the industry. Opened the portfolio with shaking hands, and what I found inside made me feel physically sick. Page after page of photographs of Emma taken over what appeared to be many different sessions. The photos showed a progression that told a terrifying story. The early images seemed relatively innocent, though Emma looked uncomfortable and confused. As the portfolio continued, the photos became increasingly inappropriate. Emma was positioned in adult-style poses wearing makeup and clothing that seemed designed to make her appear older. Her expressions grew more distressed with each session. She was not very cooperative during our last session, Marcus said, seeming oblivious to my horror. That is why we had to be a bit more firm with our direction. David assured me that she would be more compliant in the future. The bruises. The man was casually admitting that he had physically forced my 7-year-old daughter to pose for these disturbing photographs, and David had promised him that Emma would be more obedient next time. How much does David pay for these sessions? I managed to ask. Our premium package is quite expensive, but David never hesitates. $500 per session, and he has been booking them twice a month. He says Emma's portfolio is for her future modeling career. $1,000 a month. David had been spending $1,000 a month to have my daughter photographed in increasingly inappropriate ways, telling me he wanted more father-daughter bonding time while systematically exploiting her. Marcus continued talking, apparently proud of his work. We have several other young models who work with us regularly. Emma has become quite popular with our private clients who commission custom work. Custom work. Private clients. The implications made me feel faint. This was not just about photographs. There were people paying for specific images of my daughter. David mentioned that Emma might be ready for our advanced session soon. Marcus added casually. Those involve travel opportunities and meeting some very important people in the industry. I realized with growing horror that Sunday's session had been some kind of test or preparation for something worse. Whatever these advanced sessions entailed, they involved taking Emma away from the local area and exposing her to more people in this network. I would like to see your booking records for Emma's appointments, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Marcus looked surprised. David handles all the scheduling and payment. He said you preferred not to be involved in the business side of Emma's modeling career. Another lie. David had told this man that I was aware of and supportive of what was happening to Emma. He had created an elaborate fiction to explain why I never accompanied them to these sessions. Has Emma ever seemed scared or reluctant during these sessions? I asked. Marcus shrugged. Children often experience stage fright initially. That is why we have developed techniques to help them overcome their natural shyness. David is very supportive of our methods. Techniques to overcome shyness. Physical force to make children comply with inappropriate photography. And David not only approved, but actively supported these methods being used on his own daughter. I excused myself to use the restroom where I immediately called Carol. I am at the photography studio, I whispered into the phone. It is worse than we thought. Much worse. David has been bringing Emma here for months. Get out of there now, Carol said urgently. Come straight to my house. I need more information first. I need evidence of what they are doing here. When I returned to the main area, Marcus was on the phone. I could only hear fragments of his conversation, but I caught David's name and the words, asking questions, and might be a problem. He was warning David that I had discovered the studio. Whatever window I had for gathering information was closing rapidly. I should be going, I said, moving toward the door. Please tell David to call me, Marcus said. We need to discuss Emma's upcoming schedule. The clients are very excited about her next session. As I walked to my car on unsteady legs, I realized that I was racing against time. David would soon know that I had uncovered his secret, and I had no idea how he might react or what he might do to silence Emma or me. The evidence was overwhelming. Emma had been systematically exploited for months, and David had carefully orchestrated every aspect of the abuse. But I also knew that what I had discovered was just the surface of something much larger and more dangerous. The mention of private clients, custom work, and important people in the industry suggested a network of individuals involved in the exploitation of children. Emma was not the only victim, and David was not working alone. As I drove home to pick up Emma from school, one thing was crystal clear: I needed help from someone with more power and resources than local police. This was bigger than a custody dispute or even a single case of child abuse. This was organized, systematic, and involved multiple adults in positions of trust and authority. Emma's safety and the safety of other children depended on exposing the entire network. But first, I had to make sure David could not hurt Emma or silence her before I could get help. After picking Emma up from school, I drove straight to Carol's house instead of going home. I needed a safe place to think and plan somewhere David would not immediately look for us if he decided to take action after Marcus's warning call. Carol took one look at my face and immediately settled Emma in the living room with cartoons and snacks while she pulled me into the kitchen. "What did you find out?" I told her everything Marcus had revealed: the monthly sessions, the $1,000 payments, the portfolio of increasingly inappropriate photographs, and the mention of private clients commissioning custom work. Carol's face grew paler with each detail. "Annie, we have to call the police now. This is beyond anything you can handle alone." "I know, but I need to understand the full scope first." Marcus mentioned that Emma was being prepared for advanced sessions and meeting important people. This is not just David and one photographer. There are other people involved. That evening, after Emma was asleep in Carol's guest room, I made a decision that terrified me. I needed to confront David directly and get him to reveal more information. I called him from Carol's landline. "Annie, thank God you called," David answered, his voice smooth and concerned. "Marcus mentioned you stopped by the studio today. I was worried there might have been some kind of misunderstanding." The casualness of his tone, the way he acknowledged my visit as if it were perfectly normal, made my skin crawl. He was not even trying to deny what I had discovered. "I saw the photographs, David. Months' worth of photographs of our daughter." I can understand why you might be upset initially, but this is really an amazing opportunity for Emma. She has real potential in the modeling industry, and Marcus has connections that could change her entire future." He actually believed, or was pretending to believe, that what he was doing was beneficial for Emma. The delusion or manipulation was so complete that he saw no problem with having our daughter photographed inappropriately for money. Those photographs are not appropriate for a 7-year-old David, and the bruises on her arms prove that she was forced to participate. Whereas Emma is just going through an adjustment period. All young models experience some initial reluctance. That is completely normal in the industry. The way he dismissed Emma's obvious distress and pain as normal industry practice revealed how deeply he had bought into this twisted justification for abuse. "I want to see where you live now, David. I want to understand what else Emma has been exposed to during your custody time." There was a brief pause. "Of course. Why do not you come by tomorrow evening? Emma should see that we are all working together for her best interests." The invitation was too easy, too confident. David was not worried about me seeing his living situation, which meant either he had nothing to hide there or he was planning something. The next evening, I left Emma with Carol and drove to David's apartment complex across town. It was a newer building in a nice area, much nicer than what his reported income should have been able to afford. The rent alone would have cost more than his monthly salary at the insurance office where he claimed to work. David greeted me at the door with the same charming smile that had once made me feel safe. Now it made my skin crawl. His apartment was expensively furnished with modern electronics artwork and furniture that represented tens of thousands of dollars in purchases. Business has been good," he said, noticing my examination of his surroundings. "The modeling industry is very lucrative for those who understand how it works." In his home office, I found the evidence that revealed the true scope of what Emma had been drawn into. David's computer was open, displaying email conversations and file folders that made my blood run cold. The emails showed correspondence with dozens of different names, all discussing children by their first names, ages, and physical descriptions. Terms like portfolio development, private sessions, and travel opportunities appeared repeatedly, but the context made it clear these were code words for something much more sinister. Financial records showed payments far beyond what Marcus had mentioned. David was receiving money from multiple sources, and the amount suggested that photographing children was only one part of a much larger operation. Most disturbing were the folders of photographs, not just of Emma, but of many different children. Boys and girls ranging in age from what appeared to be 5 to 12, all photographed in the same inappropriate style I had seen in Emma's portfolio. David, how many children are involved in this? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Emma is part of a very select group. Only the most photogenic children are invited to participate, and their families are carefully chosen based on specific criteria. Carefully chosen families. I realized that David had not stumbled into this situation randomly. Emma and I had been targeted, deliberately selected, because we met some predetermined profile that made us suitable victims. What criteria? I pressed. David seemed pleased to explain as if he were sharing exciting business insights. Single mothers with limited support systems, fathers with flexible custody arrangements, children with the right look and temperament. Marcus has been developing this network for years. The casual way he described the systematic targeting and exploitation of vulnerable families revealed a level of organization that went far beyond a few individuals acting independently. This was a calculated operation designed to identify and exploit children whose families would be less likely to seek help or be believed if they did. A phone call interrupted our conversation. David answered casually, but his side of the conversation made me realize I was in immediate danger. She is here now asking questions about the other children, David said. No, I do not think she will be a problem. She cares too much about Emma to risk making trouble. He was talking about me as if I were a controllable element in their operation. The person on the other end was giving him instructions about how to handle my discovery of their activities. Uncle Jerry wants to talk to you, David said, handing me the phone. Uncle Jerry. My stomach dropped as I realized he was referring to Jerry Walsh, my neighbor and longtime family friend, who had been helping me with childcare and home repairs since my divorce. Jerry, who had a key to my house and knew Emma's schedule. Jerry, who Emma trusted completely and who had encouraged me to give David more custody time. Annie, sweetheart. Jerry's familiar voice came through the phone. David tells me you are concerned about Emma's modeling opportunities. I want you to know that I have been aware of and supportive of this venture from the beginning. The betrayal was so complete and unexpected that I could barely process it. Jerry had not just been aware of what was happening to Emma, he had been actively involved in facilitating it. Jerry, you knew about the photographs. I helped David identify Emma's potential and encouraged him to pursue these opportunities. The connections we have developed will benefit Emma for the rest of her life. Jerry had been reporting my schedules, my concerns, and my daily routines back to David. Every conversation I had had with him about Emma, every worry I had shared, had been passed along to the people exploiting my daughter. Who else is involved in this? I asked, though I was beginning to fear the answer. Annie, you are asking the wrong questions. The question should be what role you want to play in Emma's future success. You can be part of the solution or you can create unnecessary problems for everyone. It was a threat delivered in Jerry's grandfatherly tone that had always made me feel protected. Now I realized that his protective presence in my life had been a carefully orchestrated illusion designed to monitor and control my family. I hung up the phone and looked at David, who was watching me with an expression of smug satisfaction. He believed he held all the cards that my love for Emma would force me to cooperate with whatever they demanded. He was about to learn how wrong he was. A mother protecting her child is a force that no network, no matter how organized or connected, should underestimate. But first, I needed to understand exactly how deep this corruption went and how many people in positions of trust and authority were involved. The safety of Emma and countless other children depended on exposing everyone involved in this network, no matter how powerful or trusted they might appear to be. I left David's apartment that night, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my support system, and the people I trusted had been revealed as carefully constructed lies. But I also felt a dangerous clarity about what needed to happen next. The next morning, instead of taking Emma to school, I called in both of us for a mental health day. We needed uninterrupted time together, away from all the people who had been watching and reporting on our lives. I took Emma to a small diner across town where no one knew us, hoping the change of scenery might help her feel safe enough to tell me everything. Emma, honey, I need you to know that you are not in any kind of trouble and nothing that has happened is your fault, I said as we sat across from each other in a corner booth. But mommy needs to understand what has been happening during your special time with daddy so I can make sure you stay safe. Emma pushed her pancakes around on her plate, creating patterns in the syrup. Daddy said if I told you about the picture place, something bad would happen to you. What kind of bad thing did Daddy say would happen? He said the man who takes the pictures knows people who could hurt you, and if I was not a good girl and did what they said, they would make sure you got into trouble. My heart broke for my brave little daughter, who had been carrying this terrible burden alone for months, believing that her silence was protecting me. David had weaponized her love for me, turning it into a tool of control and manipulation. Emma, I want you to know that the only way to keep mommy safe is to tell me the truth about everything. The bad people can only hurt us if we keep secrets from each other. Slowly, piece by piece, Emma began to reveal the full scope of what had been done to her. The story that emerged was far worse than anything I had imagined. The sessions with Marcus had started innocently enough. David had told Emma they were taking professional photographs for her to have when she got older, but each session had pushed her boundaries a little further. At first, the picture man was nice and let me wear my own clothes, Emma explained. But then he started bringing different clothes for me to wear, and they felt weird and too grown up. As the months progressed, Marcus had introduced props makeup and increasingly inappropriate poses. When Emma resisted or became upset, she was told that this was normal and necessary for professional modeling. The picture man said all the other kids did these pictures, and if I wanted to be special like them, I had to do what he said. Emma continued. When I said no, he would grab my arms and move me into the right position. The bruises I had seen were not from a single incident, but the culmination of months of physical coercion when Emma tried to resist participating in sessions that made her uncomfortable. But the photographs were only part of what Emma had been subjected to. She described being taken to different locations, meeting various adults who were introduced as important people in the modeling business, and being told that these meetings were preparation for her future career. Psych. Some of the grown-ups wanted me to sit on their laps and let them take pictures with their phones, Emma said, her voice getting smaller. Daddy said I had to be polite to these people because they might give me jobs when I am older. The rage that filled me was unlike anything I had ever experienced. David had been systematically conditioning Emma to accept inappropriate contact from strangers, normalizing behaviors that should have triggered every alarm bell in her young mind. Emma, did any of these grown-ups ever touch you in ways that felt wrong or made you uncomfortable? She nodded slowly. Some of them wanted to touch my hair and my back, and one man tried to pick me up even when I said no. When I told Daddy, he said that sometimes we have to let important people do things we do not like if we want them to help us. David had been actively teaching Emma to suppress her own instincts about appropriate boundaries, training her to accept unwanted contact as a normal part of adult interaction. The last time on Sunday was supposed to be different. Emma continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Daddy said I was ready for the special pictures that would make me famous. Emma described being taken to a larger house where there were more children and more adults with cameras. She was separated from the other children and taken to a room where she was told to put on different clothes and pose in ways that made her feel scared. The man with the camera kept telling me to smile and pretend I was happy, but I was not happy at all. When I started crying, he got angry and grabbed my arms really hard. Emma's resistance during that session had apparently disrupted whatever plans David and his associates had for her. Her refusal to cooperate despite the physical force used against her had likely saved her from something much worse. Daddy said next time would be different because I would meet even more important people who might want to take me on trips, Emma said. But he looked angry when he said it, not happy like before. The trips. I realized with horror that Emma had been scheduled for the next level of exploitation, which involved taking her away from familiar surroundings and exposing her to an even larger network of abusers. "Esas, Emma, you were so brave to tell me all of this," I said, reaching across the table to take her small hands. "And you were even braver when you said no to those people, even when they tried to force you." For the first time in days, Emma looked directly into my eyes. "Mommy, I tried to be good, but it felt wrong. I was scared they were going to hurt you if I did not do what they said, but I was also scared about what they wanted me to do." My 7-year-old daughter had been placed in an impossible situation, forced to choose between protecting me and protecting herself. The fact that she had found the courage to resist, despite the threats and physical force used against her, showed a strength that amazed me. Emma, I need you to help me make sure these bad people cannot hurt any other children. Would you be willing to talk to some police officers who help kids so they can stop the bad people?" Emma was quiet for a long moment. "Will you stay with me when I talk to them?" "I will be right beside you every single moment." And you promise the bad people cannot hurt you if I tell the truth?" "I promise. The only way they can hurt either of us is if we keep letting them make us scared to tell the truth." Emma nodded solemnly. "Then I will tell them everything just like I told you." As we sat in that diner booth with Emma finally free to speak her truth after months of enforced silence, I felt both pride in my daughter's courage and determination to make sure that every person who had participated in her abuse faced justice. Emma had found her voice again, and now it was my job to make sure the right people were listening. But first, I needed to make sure that David and his network could not retaliate against Emma or silence her before the authorities could take action. The clock was ticking, and I had to be smarter and faster than the people who had been planning this exploitation for months. The next morning, I took Emma to the police station with a folder full of evidence photographs of her bruises, the business card from the photography studio, detailed notes of everything she had told me, and my own documentation of David's lies about their whereabouts. Detective Rodriguez was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a gentle manner that immediately put Emma at ease. He specialized in crimes against children and seemed genuinely concerned about Emma's story. Emma is very brave for coming forward," Detective Rodriguez said after listening to our account. "Cases like these are always difficult, but we have trained specialists who know how to help children in these situations." His initial response filled me with relief. Finally, we had found someone in authority who understood the seriousness of what Emma had experienced and who seemed committed to taking action. Detective Rodriguez arranged for Emma to be interviewed by a child specialist in a comfortable room designed to help young victims feel safe while providing testimony. While Emma was being interviewed, he took my detailed statement and reviewed all the evidence I had gathered. "Mrs. Parker, I have to tell you that these cases can be very complex," Detective Rodriguez said when Emma's interview was finished. "We need to build a solid case before we can make any arrests, and that takes time." "Well, how much time?" I asked. "Emma told me that David is planning to take her on trips with other people in this network. I am terrified that he will try to escalate things before you can stop him." "We will need to move carefully to make sure we do not tip off the other individuals involved," he replied. "In the meantime, I would recommend that you continue with normal custody arrangements so that David does not become suspicious." The suggestion that I should continue sending Emma to David after everything she had revealed struck me as completely wrong. Detective Rodriguez, are you suggesting that I should let my daughter continue to be exposed to people who have been abusing her? We need to gather more evidence before we can justify removing Emma from her father's custody. The family court system requires substantial proof before they will modify existing arrangements. Something in his tone made me uncomfortable. There was a detachment in his voice when he mentioned the family court system, as if he was reciting familiar lines rather than expressing genuine concern for Emma's safety. What specific evidence do you need? I pressed. Emma has given you a detailed account of what happened. I have photographs of her injuries, and I can provide you with the location of the photography studio where this abuse took place. Child testimony can be unreliable in court, Detective Rodriguez said. Children sometimes misremember events or misinterpret adult interactions. We need independent corroboration of Emma's claims. The dismissive way he characterized Emma's clear, detailed account as potentially unreliable sent alarm bells ringing in my mind. Emma had provided specific names, locations, and descriptions of events. This was not the confused account of a child who had misunderstood innocent interactions. Detective Rodriguez, have you investigated Sunset Hills Photography Studio before? There was a brief pause before he answered. We have had some reports about that establishment in the past, but nothing that resulted in criminal charges. Previous reports. Other children or parents had tried to report Marcus and his operations to the police, but somehow no charges had ever been filed. Either the evidence had been insufficient every time, or something else was preventing these cases from moving forward. I would like to request a copy of those previous reports, I said. I am afraid those files are not available to the public while they remain under investigation. Detective Rodriguez replied quickly. Too quickly. He had not even checked to see what he could release. He was automatically denying my request without any consideration. As we talked, I began to notice other details that made me increasingly uneasy. Detective Rodriguez knew specific details about David's custody arrangement that I had not shared with him. He seemed familiar with the photography studio's location and operations in a way that suggested more than casual professional knowledge. Most disturbing, he kept steering the conversation away from immediate action to protect Emma and toward the difficulties of prosecution and the need for more evidence. Mrs. Parker, I want to be completely honest with you about something, Detective Rodriguez said as our meeting was concluding. Cases like these are often more complicated than they initially appear. Sometimes parents misinterpret situations or jump to conclusions when they see their children in unfamiliar settings. He was suggesting that I had misunderstood the situation despite Emma's clear testimony and the physical evidence of abuse. This was not the response of an investigator who took the case seriously. Or are you telling me that you do not believe my daughter's account of what happened to her? I'm saying that we need to consider all possibilities and move carefully to avoid damaging relationships unnecessarily. Damaging relationships. He was more concerned about preserving David's parental relationship with Emma than protecting her from further abuse. After leaving the police station, I felt more frightened and alone than ever before. The system that was supposed to protect children seemed more interested in protecting the adults who were harming them. That afternoon, I received a phone call that made my blood run cold. Annie, this is Detective Rodriguez. I wanted to let you know that I spoke with David Parker about the allegations you have made. You called David? I could barely believe what I was hearing. Detective Rodriguez, I specifically asked you to keep this investigation confidential until you could gather more evidence. Standard procedure requires that we notify parents when allegations are made against them. David was very cooperative and provided explanations for all of Emma's concerns. David now knew that Emma had spoken to the police. Whatever window of opportunity I had to protect her had just been slammed shut. What explanations did David provide? Oh, he confirmed that Emma has been participating in professional photography sessions as part of a legitimate modeling portfolio. He said the bruises came from a playground accident, just as he originally told you. He also mentioned that you have been struggling with some emotional issues since your divorce and might be misinterpreting normal father daughter activities. David had managed to turn the entire situation around, making me appear to be an unstable ex wife who was making false accusations out of spite or mental illness. Meanwhile, he presented himself as a loving father whose innocent activities were being mischaracterized by a vindictive ex spouse. Detective Rodriguez, did you visit the photography studio to investigate Emma's claims? David provided documentation showing that Sunset Hills Photography Studio is a legitimate business with proper licensing and insurance. Marcus Chen has no criminal record and has been operating his studio for several years without complaints. No complaints. Despite his earlier admission that there had been previous reports about the studio, Detective Rodriguez was now claiming that no complaints had ever been filed. The conversation that followed revealed the true scope of my nightmare. Detective Rodriguez seemed more interested in protecting David and Marcus than investigating Emma's abuse. Every piece of evidence I presented was met with alternative explanations that painted me as an overprotective mother who was misinterpreting innocent interactions. As I hung up the phone, I realized that the corruption Emma had been subjected to extended far beyond David and the photography studio. The very people who were supposed to investigate and prosecute crimes against children were actively working to cover up those crimes. Detective Rodriguez had not just failed to protect Emma, he had actively sabotaged any chance of holding her abusers accountable through the normal legal channels. Emma's safety now depended on my ability to find help outside the local police department from people who were not part of the network that had been exploiting her. But first, I needed to figure out how deep the corruption went and how many people in positions of authority were involved in protecting David and his associates. After Detective Rodriguez's betrayal, I realized that the local police could not be trusted to protect Emma or investigate her abuse. That night, after Emma was asleep, I made a decision that would change everything. I contacted the FBI. Using a secure email account I created specifically for this purpose, I reached out to the FBI's Crimes Against Children unit, providing a detailed account of everything Emma had experienced and the evidence I had gathered. Within 24 hours, I received a response that gave me the first hope I had felt in days. Agent Thompson was a federal investigator who specialized in organized crimes against children. She agreed to meet with me at a secure location away from any local law enforcement offices that might be compromised. Mrs. Parker, Agent Thompson said as we sat in her unmarked car in the parking lot of a shopping center across town, your report has provided missing pieces to an investigation we have been conducting for months. The federal government had already been investigating the network that had ensnared Emma. My daughter's case was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger pattern of organized child exploitation that crossed state lines and involved multiple jurisdictions. How long has this investigation been ongoing? I asked. We have been tracking this network for over a year, but we needed someone on the inside to provide detailed evidence of their operations, Agent Thompson explained. Most victims and their families have been too frightened or intimidated to come forward. Agent Thompson revealed that the FBI had identified Sunset Hills Photography Studio as a front for a much larger operation that involved the production and distribution of illegal material featuring children. Marcus was not just a photographer, but a coordinator who connected children with a network of buyers across the country. Your ex-husband is what we call a recruiter, Agent Thompson continued. He identifies vulnerable families and gains access to children who can be exploited without immediate detection. David's sudden interest in spending more time with Emma, his requests for additional custody time, and his careful grooming of our relationship had all been part of a calculated plan to gain unrestricted access to a child he could exploit. We have been trying to penetrate this network for months, but they are very sophisticated in their security measures, Agent Thompson explained. Your willingness to work with us could provide the breakthrough we need to bring down the entire operation. She's outlined a plan that was both terrifying and empowering. Instead of trying to stop David immediately, which would only alert the network and allow them to destroy evidence, I would cooperate with the FBI to gather the evidence needed to arrest everyone involved. Mrs. Parker, I need you to understand that this plan involves risk. You would be wearing a recording device during interactions with your ex-husband and other members of the network. We would be monitoring you at all times, but there would be moments when you would be alone with dangerous people. The thought of deliberately placing myself in danger was frightening, but the thought of allowing this network to continue operating and harming other children was unacceptable. What about Emma's safety during this operation? Emma would be placed in protective custody with your sister under federal supervision until all arrests are completed. She would be completely removed from any possibility of contact with the network. That night, I made the most difficult decision of my life. I agreed to work with the FBI to expose and destroy the network that had been exploiting my daughter and countless other children. The operation began the next morning when I called David and told him I wanted to discuss Emma's future modeling career. I expressed interest in understanding more about the opportunities he had mentioned and suggested that maybe I had been too hasty in my concerns. David was eager to meet, believing that he had successfully managed the police investigation and that I was now willing to cooperate with his plans for Emma. During our meeting at a coffee shop, I wore a recording device that captured every word of our conversation. David revealed far more than he realized, describing the network's operations, the clients who commissioned custom work, and the plans for Emma's future involvement. Annie, you have to understand that Emma has incredible potential, David said, leaning across the table. The connections we have developed are willing to invest serious money in her career development. The recording device captured his admission that Emma was being marketed to specific clients who had requested children with her physical characteristics. David described these clients as successful businessmen and professionals who were willing to pay premium prices for exclusive access to young models. What kind of exclusive access? I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. Private sessions, travel opportunities, maybe even some film work. Emma could be set for life financially if we handle this correctly. David was describing the sale of access to my 7-year-old daughter to unknown adults for purposes he refused to specify directly. The recording captured his casual discussion of trafficking Emma to clients across the country. Over the following week, I gathered evidence that exposed the full scope of the network's operations. David introduced me to other parents who were cooperating with the scheme, thinking that I was now a willing participant. I met mothers and fathers who had been convinced that they were advancing their children's careers while actually facilitating their exploitation. Some genuinely believed they were helping their children break into legitimate modeling or entertainment industries. Others were clearly aware of the true nature of what they were enabling, but were motivated by financial desperation or threats. The recordings I gathered revealed a sophisticated operation that used legitimate-seeming businesses as fronts for illegal activities. Photography studios, talent agencies, and modeling schools all served as entry points for identifying and recruiting children. Most shocking of all, the investigation revealed that several people in positions of trust and authority were not just aware of the network, but actively facilitating its operations. Detective Rodriguez was one of several law enforcement officials who received payments in exchange for misdirecting investigations and protecting network members from prosecution. Judge Patricia Mills, who had handled David's and my custody case, was also implicated in the scheme. Her decisions to grant David increased custody time had not been based on what was best for Emma, but on instructions from the network to provide their recruiter with greater access to his target. The corruption extended far beyond what I had imagined, involving police officers, court officials, social workers, and community leaders who used their positions to protect the network and silence victims. On the final day of the operation, coordinated FBI raids took place simultaneously across 3 states. David was arrested at his apartment. Marcus was taken into custody at the photography studio, and dozens of other network members were apprehended at their homes and businesses. Detective Rodriguez was arrested at the police station, where he had tried to sabotage Emma's case. Judge Mills was taken into custody in her courtroom. Jerry was arrested at his home, where investigators found evidence of his involvement in coordinating the network's activities. The evidence I had helped gather led to the seizure of thousands of illegal images, the identification of hundreds of victims, and the dismantling of an operation that had been exploiting children across multiple states for years. As I watched David being led away in handcuffs, I felt not satisfaction, but profound sadness for all the children who had suffered while this network operated in the shadows, protected by the very people who were supposed to keep them safe. Emma's courage in speaking the truth had not only saved herself, but had provided the key evidence needed to protect countless other children from the same horrors she had endured. 6 months after the FBI raids, I sat in a federal courthouse watching as the final sentences were handed down for the members of the network that had exploited Emma and so many other children. The trials had been difficult, but thorough, with each defendant facing multiple charges related to child exploitation, trafficking, and corruption. David received a sentence of 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Marcus was sentenced to 30 years for his role as the primary coordinator of the photography operations. Detective Rodriguez received 15 years for corruption and obstruction of justice, while Judge Mills faced 20 years for using her position to facilitate the exploitation of children. Jerry, the family friend whose betrayal had been particularly painful, was sentenced to 12 years for his role in identifying and monitoring potential victims. The sentences reflected not just the crimes they had committed, but the positions of trust they had violated in order to harm children. Emma had been spared from having to testify in open court, but her recorded interviews with FBI specialists had provided crucial evidence for the prosecution. The child psychologists who worked with her throughout the investigation marveled at her resilience and her ability to process the traumatic experiences she had endured. Emma's willingness to speak the truth, even when she was frightened, saved not just herself, but dozens of other children. Dr. Jennifer Hayes, Emma's therapist, had told me. Her courage broke open a case that law enforcement had been struggling to crack for years. The investigation had ultimately identified over 200 victims across multiple states, ranging in age from 4 to 12 years old. Many of these children had been too frightened to come forward, believing that they would not be believed, or that speaking out would result in harm to their families. Emma's case had provided the breakthrough that gave other children and families the courage to come forward with their own accounts of abuse and exploitation. The domino effect of her brave testimony had led to justice for countless victims who might otherwise have remained silenced. The financial restitution from the criminal cases allowed me to establish the Emma's Voice Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping parents recognize the warning signs of child exploitation and providing resources for families affected by these crimes. The Foundation's educational programs teach parents and children about the tactics used by predators to identify and groom potential victims. We work with schools, community organizations, and law enforcement agencies to raise awareness about the sophisticated methods used by criminal networks to exploit children. One of our most important initiatives involves training law enforcement officers to recognize and properly investigate crimes against children, ensuring that no family faces the kind of systemic betrayal that Emma and I experienced when we first sought help. Emma herself has become an advocate for other young survivors, participating in age-appropriate educational videos that help children understand the importance of speaking up when adults ask them to keep inappropriate secrets. Ako, I want other kids to know that telling the truth is always the right thing to do, even when scary people try to make you stay quiet, Emma said during one of her recorded messages for the foundation. When we tell trusted grown-ups what is happening, we can stop the bad people from hurting more children. Her recovery has been remarkable, but not without challenges. Emma still has difficult days when the memories of her experiences feel overwhelming. Dr. Hayes continues to work with her on processing her trauma and developing healthy coping strategies. But more often than not, Emma is simply a happy 8-year-old who loves reading, playing soccer, and spending time with friends. She attends a new school where the staff has been trained to recognize signs of trauma and provide appropriate support when needed. Our relationship has grown stronger through our shared experience of surviving and overcoming the network that tried to destroy our family. Emma knows that she can tell me anything without fear of judgment or disbelief, and I have learned to trust my instincts when something feels wrong, no matter how many authority figures try to convince me otherwise. The custody arrangement that once seemed like a reasonable co-parenting solution has been permanently terminated. David has no legal right to contact Emma, and she will never be forced to interact with him again. The court documents outlining his crimes serve as permanent protection against any future attempts to manipulate the legal system to gain access to her. On weekends, Emma and I often visit the playground near our house, the real playground where children laugh and play safely under the watchful eyes of parents who love and protect them. Emma swings as high as she wants, jumps off when she is ready, and never has to worry about someone forcing her to do things that make her uncomfortable. Sometimes other parents approach me having recognized us from news coverage of the case or foundation events. They thank me for speaking out and ask for advice about protecting their own children. I always tell them the same thing. Trust your instincts, believe your children, and never stop fighting for their safety, no matter how many people try to convince you that you are overreacting. The deep life lesson that emerged from our nightmare is one that every parent needs to understand. Predators do not look like monsters lurking in dark alleys. They look like trusted community members, helpful neighbors, charming ex-spouses, and respected authority figures. They gain access to children by first gaining the trust of families, then systematically exploiting that trust to silence and control their victims. A mother's intuition is not paranoia or overprotection. When something feels wrong, it usually is wrong, regardless of how many people in positions of authority try to convince you otherwise. The courage to speak up and demand answers, even when powerful people attempt to silence you, can mean the difference between a child's continued suffering and their freedom. Emma's voice raised in truth despite her fear became the key that unlocked justice for hundreds of children. Her courage reminds me every day that even the smallest voice speaking truth to power can change the world. As I tuck Emma into bed each night, I am reminded that our journey from victimization to empowerment was possible because we refused to be silenced. We found our voices, we demanded justice, and we used our experience to protect other families from the same horrors we endured. The darkness that once threatened to consume our lives has been transformed into a light that guides other families towards safety and healing. Emma's innocence was stolen, but her spirit was never broken, and her courage continues to inspire others to speak their truth and demand protection for all children. Have you ever had to trust your instincts about your child's safety, even when others told you that you were overreacting? How do you think we as a community can better protect children from the kind of sophisticated predators who use positions of trust to exploit the vulnerable. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart or opened your eyes to dangers you had not considered before, please like this video to help spread awareness. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about courage, justice, and the power of speaking truth. Share this with other parents who need to understand that their protective instincts are not paranoia but wisdom. Thank you for listening to Emma's story and for caring about the safety of all children. Together, we can create a world where every child's voice is heard, believed, and protected.